Hello, this is the His and Hers Trauma Podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Trauma. This is my first podcast, so I'm going to get right into it and kind of give you a backstory. I'm a 47-year-old man. I have lived with trauma. I have experienced trauma on a daily basis. And I just want to kind of spread the word to other men that you're not alone. Understandably, there are not enough resources for men who experience trauma, who've experienced domestic violence from their intimate partners. When I was still in the midst of my traumatic, violent relationship with my ex-spouse, I had an exit plan. I also had a go bag, which for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it is exactly what it is. It's a bag of necessities, of clean clothes, underwear, warm stuff in a bag that I tucked away in the trunk of my car. I also had a sleeping bag back there, and I had some packs of hot hands to keep warm because it was the middle of winter when I was having concerns about my safety and just the stability of my relationship. At the time, I was really just kind of treading water. Financially, I wasn't in a position where I could just leave my home and, afford to go stay in a dingy motel. Like, I couldn't even afford that. So I had to really kind of improvise and try to just make it through each day and try to avoid any confrontation with this person as much as possible, which became more and more difficult as time went on. I had actually recently, it was within the past year that I had been arrested for domestic violence. Technically, it was harassment. And I had gotten in an altercation with my wife at the time. And, she wouldn't leave me alone, right? I mean, this was during COVID. This was, I had lost my job. She had quit her job. We were in a financial situation that wasn't pretty. And honestly, COVID for me was a horrible experience. Being home every day with this woman was a horrible, horrible experience. I can't emphasize it enough, like how wretched this was. And like Mrs. Trauma has talked about, like, we're really not here to trash talk, but it's going to happen. And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with this. I mean, for me, like, this is kind of like this venting procedure, right? Like, this is part of my therapy. And like, hopefully, somebody out there, hears this and, says, hey, that might sound kind of like similar to what I'm going through. And just understand that, like, there is an exit. But I was, just to double back, okay, so I was arrested for harassment. Like, my wife and I were just fighting a lot, okay? And, this woman would not leave me alone, right? Like, I would go into a room and she would follow me in there. And she was trying to provoke me, and she would get in my face. And I mean, she would hover, she would like put her face like 4 inches away from my face, and she would just scream as loud as she could, right? And, one day I just couldn't take it anymore, right? And, honestly, what I did was I put my hands over her ears and I fucking screamed as loud as I could. And, you know, she retracted, okay, ran off into, her bedroom and called 911, right? So when, the police got there, she told them that, like, I had choked her, which I hadn't. Whenever they questioned me, they asked if I had touched her, and I said, well, yeah, she's my wife, like, of course I touched her, like, and not really understanding, like, what they were asking me, right? And, I mean, granted, it's like, yeah, I did touch her. I was upset, right? But I was arrested. I was taken to jail. I was put on probation. I was, went through like mandatory domestic violence classes. And, I just, the whole time, like, I just, was filled with regret. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this is the worst thing that could happen, etc. And to be honest with you, from where I'm at right now, that was the best thing that could have happened at that time to me. I'm in such a better place right now. I'm married to the most amazing woman. Like, it's just, I can't even fathom like how wonderful this woman is. But it really took a lot for me to get to this point. And it took a lot of work. I spent nights sleeping in my car in the Walmart parking lot with hot hands in a sleeping bag, with my alarm set and, ready, still going to work the next day, right? So, I'm in the midst of going through this, domestic violence class, which, my wife at that time, my ex-wife, was very opposed to, right? And even whenever I, like, first, started that class, like, I just remember my first day, I'm, listening to this guy talk about his experience, and, he was just, like, in this really good mood, and he was very informed, and he was just, like, making, like, very, like, polite and just, like, pleasant conversation with the DV counselor. And I was like, what in the fuck is this? Like, this guy is just, like, I just felt like this guy, I don't know, like, he was a fraud. Okay. And I just didn't understand, like, why, like, he was talking, like, so poorly about himself and about, like, how much he learned, right? And I think it was my second or third week there, this individual, whose name I don't remember, it was his last night, right? Like, you have to go, whenever you go through these domestic violence classes, you have to go for like a year, okay? You have to, like, fulfill so many hours of class time. And, this guy had fulfilled all his, and he did his, like, final presentation, okay? And, the counselor, our domestic violence counselor, her name was Elizabeth, and she said, do you have anything to say to anyone in the class? And he looks at me and he says, I sense that you have a lot of anger, and that, you don't really understand yet what's going on. He's like, but I really, really think that you're going to learn a lot in this class. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, who the fuck is this idiot? Like, I don't need to be here. Okay. Like, seriously, like, I don't have any issues, like, I went off on, my ex once, and that's it. Like, I'm here, basically because of a technicality, right? So, as time went on, I'm spending, hours a week in this class, and I'm, starting to just identify certain things, okay? Like certain traits, certain behaviors, right? Which I won't get into right now specifically. Can probably talk about that later. But, you know, just different types of abuse, right? And, you know, the more I learned, the more I started to actually see that, like, I was in an abusive relationship, right? That I was being talked down to, right? That I was being financially sabotaged, that, like, I was being mistreated, okay? So I start to, like, really see these things and really see that, like, I'm in a problem, right? Like, my life, I have a problem, and my problem is my relationship. So, as I started to learn these things, just to double back, give a little bit of a backstory, about a year before I was arrested, I stopped drinking. And I was sober. So, you know, at the time when I'm, going through this class, I'm still sober, still not drinking, not smoking pot, my ex at the time was still smoking pot. And, for some people, that's great. Like, some people can do that. Some people can drink. And, I'm not here to tell people, like, what they can or can't do, but for me, for my happiness and, like, my quality of life, like, I really, like, I have to have sobriety. Like, I have to have a clean head. Like, I have to be clear. And I had that, right? Like, I was going through these classes, like, I had a clear head. I was sober. I was starting to see, life for what it was. And I was, like, starting to see, like, how, this relationship that I was in was very toxic. I was starting to realize, like, how I was actually being talked down to daily. I was starting to see how, just ridiculously mistreated I was. And I started to call my ex out on this stuff, right? Like, let's say I I don't have anything specific, any specific examples, but, like, I would actually start to, kind of, like, call her out. I would say, that's verbal abuse, right? If she would say something that was, like, completely condescending or whatever, I would start to, like, identify this stuff, out loud to her, speaking to her, and she became very, very upset. On a daily basis, like, the more I learned in this class, the more sober I was, the more straight I was, the more disconnected we became, right? And she started to, like, lash out. Okay. I mean, obviously, first, initially it was verbal, saying very hateful things, very hurtful things to me, which, as a man, it's like, men need to be loved. I'm just going to say it. Like, we need to be recognized in a positive fashion by our partners, It's like, I mean, I need verbal reinforcement. I don't know about you guys, but it's like, when Mrs. Trauma looks at me in the eyes and she says something like extremely pleasant and nice, it's like, it just feels amazing. So to be in a relationship with my ex or anybody that talks down to you or belittles you, it it cuts a lot. Like, it cuts deep. So initially it became like, these verbal insults and condescending things that she would say. But, eventually, like, it would start to evolve into physical lashing out, right? Like, she started to, like, physically attack me. I'm not going to get into any detail right now, but, just like you guys know, I was in the TV class, I was on probation. So it's like, she knew I was on probation. She knew that, like, if I would lift a finger, she could call the police and they would haul my ass away for, like, I don't know. I have no idea for how long, right? But so, I mean, honestly, it's like, I didn't fight back, and, I didn't want to, because, I mean, to me, it just made me sad, like, yeah, you're right. You know what? It didn't hurt. And that's, that was like, her kind of like comeback. She's like, I didn't hurt you, and it's like, no, you didn't hurt me, but it's, you didn't physically hurt me, but it's just the act, of one person striking another person it's despicable. And, yeah, so, this is progressing and it's becoming worse and it's becoming more frequent. She began to destroy, some of my things, some cherished things, very personal items. She began to, I do art on the side, like, after work, I'll, do drawings and stuff. And she started to destroy my drawings. She began to tear the clothes out of my closet and throw the clothes in the hall or throw them down the stairs or whatever. Right. Just very inhumane behaviors to act towards someone else. So, I went through all this and, it got to a certain point where it's like, she found out about my go bag and, there was hell to pay for that. Right. But at one point I just said, I was just like, fuck this. I'm fucking done. And, I just grabbed some clothes as much as I could, as quickly as possible, and I fucking ran out the door. And, I mean, you can bet your ass she fucking chased me out the door. I mean, she was like, she had jumped on my fucking car as I was, backing out the driveway. And she was trying to pull my fucking windshield wiper off. I mean, it was fucking nuts, right? So, yeah, I ended up sleeping in the Walmart parking lot a few nights. I figured out a way to, find some money, and I got a freaking motel, and it was a nasty crack motel, and I ended up staying there for 5 weeks, and I saved up money to get an apartment, and I just had to not go back. And, that was the best decision I had ever made. It was the most difficult, because I didn't want to just, I mean, I was comfortable to a certain degree, right? Like, you get in a relationship for that long and you get comfortable, right? But it's like, that was not comfortable. And I I really I just watched myself do it, honestly, guys. It was like, it wasn't a conscious choice. It was just, I just watched myself run out the door and drive off. It wasn't even, at that point, it wasn't even like a decision where I was like weighing the pros and cons. I just did it. And I wish I'd done it sooner, but I didn't. And that's okay. I'm here now, luckily, to, talk about it and, talk about my feelings about it and just express that, like, again, like, there are not enough resources out there for men who go through this. I don't know. I don't even know the statistics on this, like how many, it's pretty low how many men like actually go through this, but I know that there are some, and it's absolutely horrible. I mean, it's just, it's terrible. And, I speak from experience that it fucking sucks, and I hated every minute of it. And, getting a divorce from that person in that situation was the best thing I've ever done in my life. Honestly, it was so worth it. It was worth every penny. And, since that time, my life has just gotten nothing but exponentially better. It's like, it was just strange, not surprising, but, how life really starts to turn around, whenever you start going in the direction that the universe wants you to go, right? It's like, I knew that I was supposed to leave, and I did, and I watched myself do it. And, so many other things since then have happened to me that have just been, signs from the universe saying that, you did the right thing, you did the right thing, you did the right thing. It's like, there's just no question. So hopefully, if anybody out there is listening, they can contact us. And, like, we are here kind of just starting this podcast out, obviously. And, we want to hear your story. If you're a man, if you're a woman, you've experienced trauma, domestic violence, IPV, whatever, it's, like, and you want to talk about this, it's like, we want to talk to you. Like, we want to hear from you, because it's not talked about enough. And, I'm not saying that I'm a resource, okay, for any, like, massive amount of information. I'm just like trying to hold a mirror. I'm just trying to talk about my story, and I have a story to tell, and I feel like I have some knowledge to, give out and to share. And that's what I want to do. It's like, I've learned so much over the past year or so from this experience. I'm a new person. I feel like a new person. After coming out of, like, the ass end of this, and really coming into myself, and, meeting someone that recognized me for being a man and for being, the person that I am. And it's just, my life is beautiful now, but I know that, like, some of you out there are listening to this and probably, like, experiencing some major shit shows. And I just want to tell you that, like, crisis text line is a huge resource. Honestly, I don't even know the number to text, but my wife works for Crisis Text Line, and it's a big resource for men out there and for women. Anybody who's experiencing anything like this, any kind of crisis. I'm sure if you just Google it, you can find it, but just something to look into. I wish I had that. I wish I knew about it whenever I was going through that stuff. So, yeah, I just hope that I'm, able to like help and assist anybody in any fashion whatsoever. And this is a new experience for us. So, yeah, I am looking forward to speaking more in the future. Okay, thanks.